Hey everyone, today I want to take a look at the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition book Hammerfast, a Dwarven Outpost Adventure Site. This book was released in March of 2010, and it's the first of what was likely planned to be a series of books focused on a particular race and providing information to help dungeon masters build campaigns. We only ever got this book plus Vor Rukoth, which I will take a look at in a different video. This book is 32 pages long and is black and white except for the removable cover and the two-sided poster map. The poster map has the city on one side and then both levels of the Foundation Stone Tavern on the other. Inside the cover is a labeled black and white map of the city and a hex grid with the region where Hammerfast is located. In the softcover reprint, they include these as regular pages at the back of the book. The full color maps are included as pages in the printed book, and the PDF includes a separate file where you can download the full resolution maps. I will put links in the description if you would like to get a PDF, reprint, or used copy of this book. Before we open up the book itself, please like the video if you enjoy these, and let me know down in the comments what other D&D 4th edition books you would like me to look at next. You'll notice on the cover there appears to be an image of a dwarf walking through the city. We'll learn a little bit more about that later on. On the title page of the book, we see a sketch of the city, and then we get into details about what Hammerfast is. Hammerfast was established as a necropolis where the dwarfs would bury their dead along with all of their treasure. 100 years ago, the Bloodspear Orc tribe conquered the city and tried to take it over, but were held back by a lot of the defenses that the dwarfs had built up in the city. They suffered a lot of heavy losses, and eventually then when the Nerath Empire fell, it was determined that the city should revitalize itself as both a city for the living and for the dead. And so an accord was struck between the orcs and the dwarves, and they live side by side along with some of the ghosts of the dead that sometimes wander the streets. The next section is about how you can use this book, and there's really 3 points that come up here. First is that it's a safety net, and this is one of the things I love about the 4th edition content, is that it indicates that it's just giving you a bunch of options, and you can do with this as much as you want. So you can use this book more as a fallback to fill in the gaps for information that you can't come up with on your own, but you are free to be creative and use your imagination as you're building your campaign. Next, it mentions that the book contains a campaign arc. Later on in the book, there are some things where it provides information about some villains and some NPCs, and there are a couple ideas for quests, but it doesn't really go into any detail, so I wouldn't say that this is really an adventure module. You're not going to use this as a straight campaign book in itself, but more kind of to help feed into another campaign that you might be running or something else you're putting together. And then the last point is that it's an idea mine, and that's where it really talks about the NPCs. There are a ton of NPCs in this book that you can use either within this setting or take them as good ideas to use in another setting that you've got. The small sidebar then talks about 3 unique traits of Hammerfast. First is that it is a town where the living and the dead live together. The buildings in this town are actually the former tombs that have now been turned into homes and businesses. Some of the tombs remain sealed and are off limits for anybody to disturb them, though they are filled with treasure, so that's another opportunity for adventurers who might be curious or trying to seek wealth to try to break into those, or possibly to prevent other people from breaking into those tombs. And finally, we have that uneasy agreement between the dwarves and the orcs where they both can occupy the city simultaneously, and that can cause some tensions that could come into play during your adventure. The next page talks about Hammerfast Legacy, where it gets into some more of the details about Hammerfast and some of the flavor that you can use as you're running this town. First of all, the pact that was created to allow the dwarves and the orcs to live together in this town was put together by Moradin and Grumsh as a way to allow the town to continue. There is a strict set of rules that they put out there that everyone must follow, and there are consequences if those rules are not followed. In particular, the rules say that the worshippers of Grumsh are not to be attacked or detained within the city as long as they are not committing acts of violence against Hammerfast's residents. Next, any priest of Grumsh agrees that they must come to the aid of the town if needed. Then it says the ghosts that dwell in the city are not to be interfered with as long as they don't interfere with the living. And finally, the temples of Moradin and Grumsh are sacred ground, and if either one is attacked, then the gods will intervene. These rules do not actually set out what it means for the gods to intervene in that situation, so that's kind of left up to the dungeon master to figure out. Punishment for violating the other terms of this agreement include exile, blinding, torture, and even execution. Next, it talks about the houses of the dead, and we we mentioned this in the 3 unique traits, that the homes and businesses in this town are often former tombs that have been reconstructed and used for those purposes. They have very thick stone walls, and in some cases the sarcophagus itself is still located inside the building. There's rumors that some of these structures actually still have hidden chambers in them where there might be additional treasure and wealth, and that could be something that you want to explore in your campaign. The tombs that are intact are not to be disturbed, and again, that could be something that would be interesting for a campaign, to either have a situation where the party needs to try to get into one of those tombs or needs to try to prevent somebody else from getting into one of those tombs. The next section talks about ghosts of the past. Hammerfast was originally a necropolis, so it is filled with the dead dwarfs from long ago, and since they've built this now living city on top of it, there are ghosts that may appear from time to time. It is very clear here, though, that it is not swarming with ghosts. It's not like you're going to have ghosts interacting with everyone and you're not going to see them all the time. It mentions that you may see at least one ghost during the course of a week, so it's just kind of something that comes up every now and then, and it indicates that the ghosts mostly keep to themselves. In lots of cases, they're just kind of reenacting the final moments of their lives and not really paying attention to anything else that's going on. It next gets into some of the government structure of the town. It's broken up into 3 different guilds: the Trade Guild, the Lore Guild, and the Craft Guild. The Trade Guild is responsible for all of the commerce that happens within Hammerfast, as well as trading with other cities within the Nentervale. The Lore Guild is concerned with the education and running these schools and museums and libraries and those sorts of things. And then the Craft Guild is sort of a union for the more independent craftspeople within the town to make sure that they have a voice. The heads of these guilds make up the Council of Hammerfast, and then the High Master is elected as the leader who essentially runs the town and is the mayor of the town. Currently, the High Master is the leader of the Trade Guild, who is Marcinda Goldspinner. We'll talk a little bit more about her later. The next section talks about holidays. There's essentially one holiday for each of the seasons, and you get a little bit of information about what that holiday is for and some of the events that happen for that holiday. This is really great for kicking off a campaign, because a lot of times you have that inciting incident happens during one of these holiday celebrations, so you get a nice little foundation for that here. The next section talks about the surrounding terrain. Hammerfast is located up in the Dawnforge Mountains, and that is very difficult terrain to travel through. You're going to see a lot of trolls and hill giants and ogres and those types of creatures as you're trying to get into Hammerfast. Inside the cover of the book, you do have a hex grid of the entire region, so if you wanted to do some overland travel type encounters, you could use that hex grid to get the party to move across through the mountains and the foothills and everything. The section on geography talks about some of those specific locations, such as the fact that the foothills have a lot of humanoid tribes that are fighting with each other, which could cause some conflict if your adventuring party gets caught up in that. Forge Peak is the largest mountain in the region, and there is actually an ancient red dragon sleeping within. There's a little bit more about that later on in this book. Outside of the geography, the next section talks about some specific locations. Dungeon of the Fire Opal is covered a little later in the book as well, but it's basically a place where there are gnolls that are searching for this gem. There's lots of tunnels and things that you might come up with on your own. It doesn't go into a lot of detail on it, but it's a good place for some dungeon crawls and things like that. High Peak has a group of miners that are willing to hire adventurers to perform certain tasks, such as protecting caravans along the Iron Road. Glimmer Peak is home to various treasures that the party might be seeking. Stravala's Tower is in this interesting valley that's filled with very fragrant flowers, so it draws you in, but there's a powerful hag named Queen Stravala that lives there, and that could be an interesting encounter for the players. And then finally, 2 roads, the Trade Road and the Iron Road, intersect, and there are some dwarf warriors that live there, and in most cases they're just going to try to fight anybody that gets in their way. I like this next section talking about inhabitants. A lot of times when you're putting together your campaign, you're looking for the right creatures to put into your encounters, and it's not always clear what types of creatures you should have. Here it comes out and tells you that you're going to find bandits, you're going to find Weeping Skull Tribe, you're going to find spider goblins, you're going to find Goliaths. It also mentions that there's going to be Ankhegs, Bloodhawks, Direboars, Cave Bears. So it's really nice that it gives you all of that detail of what you can put in your encounters to make sure that they fit well within this particular region. The next page covers some of the important NPCs within the city. We mentioned before that the High Master is Marcinda Goldspinner. She is the head of the Trade Guild and is also the High Master of the town itself. She is very outspoken and is always looking for things that are going to advance the town and is not really concerned with a lot of the small goings on. The other key players in town are Lord Commander Tenkar Stoneshield, who is the head of the town guard, and then the head of the Lore Guild is Lore Master Geld Seekingstone, and the head of the Craft Guild is Master Artisan Frelda Blackshield. There's a small sidebar in this page indicating that a couple of the issues that face Hammerfast are the food supply and the need to get food up into this location, which is quite remote and hard to get to. And then, of course, the tensions between the dwarfs and the orcs that reside in the town. And next we come to the largest section of this book. Here it goes through great detail about all the different locations in this town. The town is broken up into 4 wards: the Gate Ward, the Trade Ward, the Lore Ward, and the Craft Ward. And with each of these wards, we have several locations, and you get a lot of good descriptions, some good NPCs, some good ideas for quests, and a lot of stuff that you can build on as a dungeon master. The Gate Ward is a walled off section of the town that was where the living quarters were for the guards and such that guarded the necropolis when it was a necropolis and housed just the tombs. This section is kind of isolated on an island between a couple rivers, and there's bridges that go over them. This ward is really a city in itself. It has pretty much anything that the adventure party is going to need. There are stables, there is a tavern, there is a bank, there's an inn, there's several different places they can interact with. All of these locations have great NPCs. They have great ideas for some quests that they could get, and just a lot of flavor that you could build on as a dungeon master. The Trade Ward is where all the economic work happens. So a caravan that's coming into town will probably pass through the Gate Ward and end up in the Trade Ward, and this is where you're going to find the warehouses and those sorts of things that are related to commerce. Within this area, there is also an inn, and there are several tombs located here. There's a fish market, there's a bank, there's a lot more NPCs to work with. So another nice section of town that's kind of self-contained. A lot can happen just in this one area, and there's a lot to build on. Next, we have the Lore Ward. And students from all over the Nentervale will come to Hammerfast to learn because it is a center of learning. There are several temples in here. There are libraries. There is a museum. There's a lot of stuff of educational value. And the Lore Guild takes pride in maintaining that reputation as an institution of knowledge. So you will find lots of artistic people here, lots of scholarly people in this area. Again, lots of NPCs, lots of lore that you can use to build your campaign. And then finally, we have the Craft Ward. Here we have the independent artisans that put together their crafts that they then want to sell to other areas. And so in here you have a dormitory where all those artisans might be staying. The Black Spire is a temple to Grumpsh that is sometimes the target of some attacks. And the Craft Spire is a 5-story tower where the masters of the major arts hold court. One of the key locations of the Gate Ward that I mentioned earlier, but it actually has a couple pages dedicated to it, is the Foundation Stone. This is a tavern where basically everyone gets together and meets. If you're looking to get a quest to the party, this is probably a good place for it. In many ways, this serves the purpose as like the Yawning Portal would in Waterdeep. It is that central location where everybody comes together and things happen. On this page, we get a nice description of exactly what this tavern looks like. All the little details from the tables, the chandelier, the pit in the middle of it, the private rooms that exist, all the details that you would need. One side of the poster map is actually both levels of this tavern, so you have a nice grid that you can use to play out encounters here. There's an interesting section talking about fun and games where it goes through a couple of the games that are played in this tavern. So you have Giant's Feet is one game, and you get all the rules for that. And then you also have knife throwing as a competition that happens inside this tavern. Next, there's a list of notable NPCs, including the owner of the tavern, as well as several other people that they might encounter to get quests from or have other interactions with during their campaign. Next, we get into the villains of Hammerfast. So now we're starting to talk about building a campaign here and giving you a little more detail of what you can do if you wanted to create a campaign in Hammerfast. So there are actually 3 villains that they're going to cover here. The first is Grond, who is a fanatic who is under the sway of a succubus and is looking to destroy the Temple of Grumpsh. Thar wants to awaken Calistrix, who is the ancient red dragon that is sleeping inside Forge Peak. And Carthane is kind of the middleman for both of these. Whenever Grond or Thar has some dirty work to be done, Carthane is probably the person they're going to call on to get it done. So these 3 people make up the villains that you might have as the boss in your campaign. The next section gives you a list of quests that you can provide to your party for each level as they're moving through a campaign set in Hammerfast. This is not giving you all the quests that you would need to perform in order to get those characters from level 1 all the way to level 10. There's only one quest per level here. These are the main quests that would tie to a campaign, and then you would have to come up with other quests to fill in the gaps and have side quests and maybe build on these quests by providing some other things as well. So in each case, you get something tied to some of the NPCs that we've talked about, and it indicates how it ties into the campaign for each of the different villains. And you can see that there is one quest then for each level all the way up to level 10. And the last set of pages here talks about the villains themselves. So you get some information about the villain and what types of creatures would be found around those villains, where those villains hang out. First of all, it covers Carthane, who is a good villain for the players once they start reaching the higher levels of the heroic tier. We get our stat block for Carthane, as well as Sirlek Undertow, who is Carthane's lieutenant and handles a lot of the details. So you have someone that they could face off with before they actually get to Carthane. I particularly like the sections in each of these chapters where it talks about the creatures that you would find around each of the villains. So it goes through that Sirlek's followers include a gnome skulk, a gnome arcanist, a guard drake, and on down the list. And then Carthane's gang includes this list here. That's really helpful, again, as you're putting together your encounters, to know what types of creatures you should be populating those encounters with to be in keeping with the setting that you're located in. After Carthane, the other villain is Grond Silverstar, and he is a fundamentalist priest of Moradin and actively working to try to drive the orcs out of Hammerfast, and in particular to destroy the Black Spire, which, if you remember, was a temple to Grumsh. So again, we have his stat block along with the types of creatures that you would find around him if you're building encounters leading up to his boss battle, and then gives you information about his attitude and how you might roleplay him. And the last villain that we have is Thar. Thar is interested in waking up Calistrix, who is sleeping in Forge Peak, and then partnering with Calistrix to destroy the Ninter Vale. And here we see that we get a stat block for not only Thar, but also for Calistrix. We get our creatures that you would find around Thar, so you can build out those encounters, along with the details about the personalities and how to roleplay those two characters, both in perhaps a social encounter or in combat. This last section I think is interesting. It sounds like as they were brainstorming Hammerfast and what you could do with it, they had a lot of ideas to work with. And they came up with a few that they used as the main campaign elements for the setting, but there were other ones that they thought were good enough to where they wanted to make sure that they were included as well. What you have on these pages is several of those other ideas that you could use to build out a campaign, in addition to or instead of the ones that they actually featured in the main book itself. And as I mentioned, there is a poster map that shows the entire city of Hammerfast and the 4 wards: the Gate Ward, the Trade Ward, the Lore Ward, and the Guild Ward. And then on the other side of the poster map is the first and second floor of the Foundation Stone Tavern, with the pit in the middle, and you can see the second level that looks down upon the first level with a chandelier hanging across the middle. And then inside the cover is a hex grid with the region showing the Dawnforge Mountains. You can see Forge Peak. You can see Hammerfast right in the center. And then some of the other locations that were listed in the book can also be found on that map. And on the right, we have a smaller map of Hammerfast with some labels on it to help the Dungeon Master to keep track of things. And that is Hammerfast, a Dwarven Outpost Adventure Setting. I really think this book is interesting. I wish they had more of these types of books. It provides a lot of nice background, a lot of tools that a dungeon master could use to create an adventure, to build an entire campaign, or to even just set a couple of encounters in Hammerfast as part of another campaign that's just passing through. I like the fact that it was printed in black and white, so it kept the cost down and was more accessible to a dungeon master, so they had more tools to work with. A lot of the stuff that's provided in here is really helpful to help fill in the gaps, to help round out a campaign that you're putting together. A lot of great tools for a dungeon master. But let me know your thoughts. Do you have this book? Have you used it for your campaigns? Are there some things that I missed in here that you have used in yours that I should have mentioned? Let me know all that stuff down in the comments. If you're interested in getting the book, remember down in the description is links where you can pick up a PDF, a reprint, or even a used copy if you're interested. If you want to help out my channel, please most of all subscribe and like this video, and leave a comment if you have something that you want to share about Hammerfast or D&D 4th edition in general. And there's some other ways you can help out the channel down in the description as well. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Until next time, take care.